Everyone needs some sensible conversation once in a while. Why don't you train your own AI chatbot on yourself so you have somebody cool to talk to all the time? Inspired by this fantastic project on Replit, where IronCladDev has trained GPT-3 on CEO Amjad Masad, I decided that it'd be really cool to try and build a bot of me. Let's look at how we can use LangChain and GPT-3 to build a realistic AI bot of anybody at all. Now, of course, if you want to jump to the end of this video, you can simply fork my REPL, add the training data and run it to get straight to the point. But that's not why we're here, is it? Let's look at the code. First, I'm going to do in my project is add to my secrets, and I'm going to add my OpenAI API key. This is really easy to get if you've got an OpenAI account. Bear in mind you will need some credits, or at least the free credits for the first 3 months to make this work. When you've got your API key, paste it into the secrets manager and let's get on with the Python. What we need to do is start off by creating a folder that we're going to stick all our training data in and getting our program to read that in and store it in a way that's useful for the LLM. So from the pathlib library, I'm going to take path, and what I'm going to do there is just scan every file within the folder training and facts and take that in as if it was training data. I need to go and create that folder structure. So I've got a training folder at the root. Inside there, I've got facts. What I'm going to do in that facts folder is I'm going to populate it with as many text files and markdown files as I can with information from the person I'm trying to recreate. Now, the more personal these are, the more these give an insight into the voice of the person, the better. For the bot IronClad built, he used blog posts, transcriptions of YouTube videos, transcriptions of podcasts, internal training documents, anything that was written by Amjad. For mine, I'm going to start with one piece of documentation, which is just a transcript of a podcast where I talked for quite a while. Now, I've used OpenAI's Whisper to transcribe this, but that's for another video. Fill that folder full of as many documents as you can find. This will help the AI give more context to who it's pretending to be. Okay, let's pull that data in. I'm going to create a list and just read through every file in that folder and pull the text in together. I've now got one list called data that contains all of the training information, but this isn't quite good enough. If we were to send this off to our LLM, we'd get errors all over the place because LLMs are limited by the amount of tokens they can process in one go. Now, DaVinci 3, which is OpenAI's GPT-3, the maximum chunk size for any bit of information is 2000. So that means we'll need to use part of LangChain to process and split that information up into 2000 byte sections. So I'm going to process my data list into a new list called docs by running it through that character text splitter. Now let's run that to check it works, and instantly it processed all files in that folder. Okay, but this is still a really inefficient way to store data that can be used by an LLM. What we need to do is store it in a vector-based format. We're going to use a library called FAISS, F-A-I-S-S, which is a way of efficiently storing really dense vectors of information, which is exactly what this training data will be. Of course, it's worth saying here that we're not actually training the AI in the traditional sense. What we're doing is providing it with an external data source that it can use to generate its responses and telling it how close to stick to that external data source. Tomato, tomato. We're also going to need our OpenAI embeddings from LangChain because we're going to be making sure this works in OpenAI. And I'm also going to bring in Pickle, which we're going to use to serialize some data to be sent to the LLM. I'm going to start by creating a store for our face data. And that's going to work by taking our docs and passing them through as OpenAI embeds. We're then going to write that out to a file. Now, the reason for that is mainly caching. I'm going to blank that data out then so I've got room in my RAM just in case. I'm then going to serialize the stored data with Pickle and store them in a different file. Now, when you run this, you'll notice a significant pause as it processes all that data, converts it into the vector format and saves it to file. But eventually you notice those files pop up in the file pane and the program terminate. Congratulations, you've trained your bot on all that data. Now, let's run the actual bot. I'm going to take the code I've just written and turn that into a subroutine called train so that we can call it again if we need to. And I'm going to bring in two more things from libraries. From LangChain, I'm once again going to bring in OpenAI and LLM chain, which will allow us to use our training data in the LLM model and talk to OpenAI to use GPT-3. I'm also going to bring in prompts, which will allow us to write the prompts we need. And let's build that out as a subroutine as well, so that we've got both options in our one program. First job, let's read that face data in. We also need to deserialize it from our pickle file so we can actually access it. And I'm also going to open a file called training master. Now let's take a look at what's in that file, and you'll see there that it is the basis of the prompt. It is giving the AI the character that it's going to have. So aside from all of that training data, all of the information we've given it from blogs, from transcripts of YouTube videos, from transcripts of podcasts, from any secret diary entry we've found of the person we're making the LLM of, all that information will be used, but based on this initial context. This is where you need to tell it how to answer questions, what sort of tone to use, some background to the person who it's pretending to be, the types of references they should make. You'll see here, I've just made a silly statement that comedy references will be from between the 80s and the noughties. And that's simply because that's where my references come from. All of this information is important, but it's those bottom few lines that you'll need to leave intact to get it to work. We're then going to construct our prompt. Now our prompt is going to take in the prompt template, which is that overview we've just talked about. And we're also going to give it input variables. There are three things we're going to want to give it: the history, the context, and the question. Now in this mode, the history is the history of our conversation we've had, the context is the training data, and the question is literally the question that's being asked by the user. We're then going to connect it up to the LLM chain, and this is where we get to give it the prompt and a temperature. The temperature is the really interesting variable. It is a value between 0 and 1 that essentially tells it how off book to go. If you've noticed AI's hallucinating answers, this is because the temperature value is higher. 0 means that it will only use the information given, but that doesn't always give us the most exciting bots. So I'm going to set mine to 0.25 here, so it's got a little bit of leeway to make things up. We're now going to define a subroutine within a subroutine for what happens when we get a message with the variables question and history. We'll use the training data to make a similarity search, which is how those vectors are computed, and then we'll go through and append them to context, which is something that we're going to have to feed to the LLM. We're then going to ask for the answer. Now to do this, we need to give it the question, the context, which is all of that training data we've just passed together, and the history, which is the history of the conversation, so it has some memory about what we said to it before. That's particularly important because if we don't use that third option, it won't have the ability to maintain a chat record with us. It'll be stateless like HTTP. In the main code of the program now, we're going to make a while true loop. I've made a list for history, and every time I ask a question, I'm going to send it to the onMessage subroutine, print it out, and then append both of those to the history. Each time a user asks a question, the entire history is sent as well as the context. Let's give it a go. We'll start simply with who are you, and you'll see there that, well, yeah, it's great. It's understood the context, and it's taken a lot of that from the main prompt template. But let's get into a little bit more detail now. Now, the interview that I've supplied it with was mainly about education technology. So I'm going to say what is the worst part of ed tech in schools. Now, I probably went on a rant for that for a significant amount of time. And yeah, that's a pretty good answer. That's sort of exactly what I'd say. Let's ask it for my favorite piece of ed tech and see what it comes back with. Well, what else would it say? Of course it would say Replit. We have now trained a bot on me. We have a virtual version of me that we can interrogate and ask questions to, or you can make public, as long as you're willing to spend the money on your API requests. PSA, you may want to make sure you rate limit this if you open it up to the general public, because AI queries can get very expensive very fast. So there you have it. You've built and trained your own bot based on a person of your choice, and you've got a wonderful command line program to work with it. But for extra points, maybe you want to set it up to become its own API. Maybe you want to plug that into a Slack bot, or to a different UI, or you want to set it up to talk to iMessage. Well, setting up with an API would be a great first place to go there, and Replit makes that really easy. I'm going to rework this code by taking away the training code and putting it elsewhere because I don't really need it at the moment. And I'm going to use Flask to open it up and make it an API. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to use basically the same code as before to allow a consistent conversation to happen, but through a JSON API that we define. You probably want to create an API secret so that not just anybody can query this if they find it. You can set that to whatever you want, but set it up as a secret in the REPL so that it's hidden from your users. Now when I'm creating this LLM chain, I'm giving it a bit more information. This was all set to default previously, but in this one I'm specifically requesting DaVinci 3, which is GPT-3. By default it will just use the most advanced version. And I'm manually sending it my API key this time, rather than relying on the API key being named consistently in the secrets. I'm going to build a couple of JSON returns. If I get valid information, I'm going to send that prompt to the LLM, return the answer and return that with the history back to the user. If I get an error of any kind, I'm going to nope out of that code entirely and return them an error state. I'm also going to return them an error unauthorized state if they haven't used the correct API key to access my API. Of course, you can add more detail to that if you want, and you can even report the correct errors. I just want security through obscurity for my own API. Add the ability for it to run and host its own website, and click go, and boom, you've got a website that you can instantly query using JSON and you'll get results back. You can plug this into whatever you want in most ways really simply. And if you go back and look at the project that inspired this from IronCladDev, you'll see he's gone and built a ghostwriter-like front end for this conversation. Now, not only do you have a trained chatbot, but you've got a chatbot that will reply to any other service as long as you can connect it via your own API. Go fork my project, build it yourself, but we'd love to see what you do with it. Post in the comments your chatbot trained on somebody fun. Remember, you can even use this to build chatbots of historical figures, or famous people, or your mum.